Okay, so let's jump right into a genuine historical detective story. This year, we're actually marking a massive anniversary, 100 years since the world was first told about a civilization that was completely lost to time. And this wasn't just any civilization. It was so huge and so advanced, it literally changed everything we thought we knew about the ancient world. So picture this. It's September 20th, 1924. John Marshall, who's the head of India's Archaeological Survey, makes this huge announcement. He reveals hard evidence of a culture that, up until that point, was completely unknown to modern history. It was like finding a whole new chapter in the story of humankind. And the age of this place? Well, that was the really mind-blowing part. This wasn't just some forgotten kingdom from a few centuries ago. No, this was a true cradle of civilization, thriving an incredible 5,000 years in the past. But here's the real twist, the central mystery of it all. Even after a full century of digging and research, the biggest questions about these people, like who they were, what they believed in, why they just disappeared, are still a total blank. So how on earth is that possible? To really get the mystery, you gotta go back to the beginning, back to the very first detectives on the case, the archaeologists, who literally just stumbled upon the first clues. So the story really kicks off in the early 1920s. In 1921, an archaeologist named Dayaram Sahani starts digging at a place called Harappa. Then, just a year later, another guy, R.D. Banerjee, starts excavating a different site, Mohenjo-daro. The thing is, they were working completely separately, no idea that their two little projects were about to be connected in a way that would rewrite history.
And I mean, think about the distance here. These two sites were almost 650 kilometers apart. But when their boss, John Marshall, brought them both together to show what they'd found, he had this incredible aha moment. The little seals, the pottery, the beads, they were pretty much identical. This wasn't two different towns. This was one single, enormous, unified culture.
And Marshall knew exactly how big this was. His announcement, in his own words, cast a new light on a long-forgotten civilization. He'd connected the dots and revealed a past that nobody, and I mean nobody, even knew existed. So with all these clues finally pieced together, what kind of world can we reconstruct? Well, it turns out it was way more sophisticated than anyone could have imagined. Just take a look at their cities. I'm not talking about a few huts here. We're talking about perfectly planned streets laid out in a grid pattern, something a lot of modern cities can't even get right. They had complex, covered drainage systems, gigantic granaries to store food, and huge public buildings like the famous Great Bath at Mohenjo-daro. This was some serious engineering. You know, the layout of the cities tells its own story. They were usually split into two main parts. A big lower town where most people lived and worked, and then a raised, walled-off area called the citadel. This really suggests they had a super organized society with a clear hierarchy, maybe a ruling class or priests living up high, separate from everyone else. And their tech skills? Just as impressive. These people were masters of metallurgy, working with bronze and copper like it was nothing. They developed a whole system of standardized weights and measures, which is absolutely crucial for trade. And their craftsmanship, from the pottery to those tiny, intricate animal seals, was just beautiful. They even mass-produced standardized bricks to build everything. And if you want just one example of their genius, check this out. They used the lost wax technique for casting metal. This is a really complicated process that let them create incredibly detailed bronze figures, like that iconic dancing girl statue. This wasn't a simple society. This place was a hub of innovation. Okay, but for everything we found out about what they built, the biggest questions about who they were, well, those are still locked away tight. This is where the case goes completely cold. Think about it. The key to understanding any civilization, their history, their beliefs, their laws, it's all in their writing. And the Indus people definitely had a writing system. We found it on thousands of these little seals. So what amazing stories do they tell us? The answer? We have absolutely no clue. For 100 years, the best minds on the planet, linguists, code breakers, have tried to crack this script, and they've all failed. We can literally see their words, but we can't read them. Their voices are completely silent. And that leads to the final haunting question. This powerful, super organized, and widespread civilization was on top of the world for centuries. And then, poof, they just faded away. The great cities were abandoned. Why? Well, the modern-day detectives, archaeologists, and historians have a few competing theories. Some point to clear evidence of a massive, prolonged drought. Others think the rivers they relied on, like the Indus, might have changed course, which would have totally wrecked their farming. And a few even argue they were invaded. But the honest truth is, there's no smoking gun. No single theory fits all the evidence perfectly. It could have been climate change, maybe some other factors, or a mix of everything. For now, the cause of death for one of the world's great ancient civilizations is still officially listed as unknown.
So after 100 years, why are we still so obsessed with this unsolved case? Well, because its discovery didn't just add a new chapter to history. It completely rewrote the entire book.
You see, before 1924, there was this huge, confusing gap in the history of the Indian subcontinent. It was like the story jumped straight from the Stone Age to the time of the Buddha, with thousands of years just missing. The discovery of the Indus Valley civilization filled that void. It single-handedly pushed back the timeline of complex urban life in that part of the world by an incredible 3,000 years. And this discovery put them right where they belong, on the world stage. The Indus Valley civilization wasn't some isolated little culture. Nope, they were a major power, living at the same time and as equals with the other giants of the ancient world, like Egypt and Mesopotamia. They were trading with them, interacting with them, part of the world's very first global age. And that brings us right back to the heart of this incredible mystery. After a century of searching, we're left with this ghost of a civilization, a people without a voice. The clues are all there, tantalizingly close, carved on thousands of tiny seals. If we could finally crack that code, what would they tell us about their world and about ours? It's the ultimate reminder that history isn't just about what we know, but about the profound mysteries we have yet to solve.